Okay, very good. It's 7:02 on May 23rd, 2019. I'm Dr. Frank McMillan, Jr. I am the chairman of the Board of Health in North Andover, and I'm calling the meeting to order. The next order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. The minutes have been distributed. Are there any corrections?
No, they've been distributed, critiqued, and I make a motion that they have approved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say no. The minutes are approved. The ayes have it. Next item on the agenda is the public hearing for Baba's Pizza, a variance request for label requirements.
I recommend we table this towards the end because he can't make it tonight, so I was going to present for him. This is somebody else for a different hearing tonight.
Okay, very good. It's been moved to table. Is there a second to table?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of tabling, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. It is tabled. Next, we have old business, which is department reports.
We can do that at the end as well.
All right, we'll do that by acclamation, unless there's objection. Seeing no objection, we'll move on to new business. David, I'm sorry, I'm going to mess your name up. Barthium? Barthium.
Yep.
Waste Management Route Manager on a dumpster complaint.
All right.
Mr. LaGrasse.
So this is obviously where I was skipping ahead because David is here with us. I did give you guys a write-up in your packets, and this is item number 2. And I'm going to pass this off to Stephen, who's going to give you a brief synopsis as to what's been going on with this particular situation.
So basically, from what I understand, we've been having an issue with the plaza over at 535 Chickering Road. Originally, it wasn't just with you guys. It's been going on for a while. But I've been here about 2 months, and I know you guys have been the contracted waste hauler for them. And we've gotten 3 different complaints. The first one was it was April 1st, and it was at about 6:40 in the morning, which that one's not too bad, you know what I mean? Because our regulation states you can start at 7, and since we have the people living and abutting the dumpsters, pretty much, that's the issue with it. But the next 2 we had were the following Monday, the 8th, at 4:45 in the morning, and then 2 weeks later, the 22nd, at 4:55 in the morning. So obviously, we've been having more than one issue as far as the timing of these dumpsters being picked up, and our regulation, as I mentioned before, does state that they can't be picked up between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. So we were just kind of wondering what you guys have been doing to kind of address this.
Well, it hasn't happened since the last complaint.
Yep.
The last 2, the second and the third complaint were from our recycling truck. And
Okay.
I had addressed it with the truck that picks up trash. There's 2 different trucks. One that picks up trash and one that picks up recycling. So the second and third one were from
Can you stand up here? Yeah, please. That would be great. Thank you.
Yep. So the second and third complaint were the recycle truck. Third time it happened, I addressed it with the driver. You cannot go there before 7 a.m. anymore. Now, we do have GPS on our trucks. I can track the whole path that they follow and where they are through the course of the day.
Okay.
Or get a live feed to see where they are at any given moment. So we use that to determine that it was the recycle truck, it wasn't the trash driver. So since that third complaint, they have not been back. What we did was we reordered the route, the sequence of the stops, how he does them, so that he would be there later in the day. And that's all I had for that. So since then, there hasn't been anything.
Yeah, we haven't gotten one since the last one on the 22nd. And I did want to say too that the owner of the plaza has been pretty accommodating with trying to prevent this.
Yeah.
Since the last complaint, he's installed a lock on the enclosement
Yes.
for the dumpster.
Yep.
And then he's also in the process of getting a sign up just stating basically it can't be picked up between those specified times. I think he's aiming for a week or two on the sign to come in. It's been ordered. But yeah, that's what's been going on with that complaint so far. So I'm glad you guys have kind of addressed it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I apologize that it went to a third time. That was me addressing it with the trash driver, not even thinking that it was the recycle driver.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Till I followed his GPS and,
Yeah.
gosh, it's him, so
Okay.
that was where that went. That
Alright,
was
yeah.
And we definitely appreciate you guys coming to the meeting tonight to talk to us. It's been a long-standing issue, even prior to you guys getting the contract. This is the third dumpster contractor working at this plaza, because it's been happening so much.
Which plaza is this?
Quick Pick in McAloons.
Oh, okay, all right.
So the dumpster enclosure is over by the VFW in the back corner.
Right,
But there's a
there's
residential
residents,
house that lives
yeah.
right there. And to be woken up at 4:45 in the morning with a dumpster clanging over and over again, she's literally losing her mind.
Right.
So I've been dealing with her for a couple of years now. Said you guys are the third dumpster contractor.
Right.
I pray that this solves everything.
I believe me, it's been addressed with the drivers.
Awesome.
In fact, not just those two drivers, because obviously they go on vacation,
Yes.
things like that.
Yep.
This went up in front of all of the drivers, anybody that
Okay.
might be covering too.
Yep.
There is also notes on the route. They have
Okay.
a tablet in their truck with the stops they go
Yes.
through. So there's a note on that stop not to be picking it up before 7 a.m.
Okay.
Okay.
So-
Thank you.
Awesome.
We really do appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else, Stephen, you can think of?
No, I think that's about it.
Okay, so we just wanted to bring this before your attention, have them come in, address the issue, and then hopefully there's no more complaints, no more issues with this. If something does arise, then we might have to call you back in for the board.
I understand.
I don't know what our legal authority is to go beyond that in terms of suspending or revoking any type of waste hauling permits, but legal action will be taken if this continues. I know you guys are going to do your best to not do that.
Right.
Okay.
Well, we do have a fine that Mr. Kenny was supposed to be here. We had an issue
Okay.
further north, and he's having to stay up there overnight at a sister site.
Gotcha.
There was a $100 fine.
Yes.
It was supposed to be paid by this Tuesday.
Yes.
I'll write out a check myself if I have to, but he did get it approved.
Okay. All right.
He's just saying you're not going to get it by Tuesday.
You know what, as long as you guys are on board with that, then that's fine.
Okay.
You understand that, send it in as soon as
He
you
was
can.
concerned about that because
Okay.
every time you go to get a cut a check for something like, it takes us forever. It's
Understandable. We go through the same process.
exactly.
But yeah.
I knew you'd understand
Yeah.
that. But is there anything else then?
No, we do appreciate you coming in and just appreciating the severity of the situation for this resident in this area.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
All right.
for coming.
Thank you.
So before we close the item, regulation, section 3.7 says failure to comply with these regulations may result in a fine of $50 for each day the violation continues, as well as suspension and revocation of permits as deemed necessary by the Board of Health. I assume that's where the $100 fine came from, two
Yes.
violations after the first one was
Correct.
reported.
There was two that we went and met with Billy Bucco and viewed the video surveillance system.
Yep.
And documented them being there at that time. And
Okay.
There was two documented situations that we witnessed.
All right. So essentially, we have no further action on this item then? Okay. Is there anybody has any further discussion on this? Nope. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item. I have communications announcements and discussions. TBI discussion. We are still not yet at a vote.
Okay, so after the last meeting, we received the packet that was sent to DEP. I forwarded that to you guys for your review. I want to see if you guys had any questions or comments about the packet and the information that we received from TBI. after the last meeting.
No questions.
Open for discussion.
Okay. Some things we talked about at the last meeting, I did get some answers to. I did speak with the building department, and they've indicated that these structures can be considered temporary. It's under the building department's purview, depending on the structure itself and how long they'll be there. There is a clause in there about 60 days, but that is, like I said, under their jurisdiction and under their purview. And if it's going to be something that can be taken down easily and quickly, such as the structures that Jeff had talked about, they would consider it temporary and extend the 60-day deadline for as long as needed. So that's been taken care of. I think that makes it a little bit easier to move forward and getting to the next step. I think the only thing that remains from the questions we had at the last meeting was storing waste outside. Part of the baling operation does store residual waste in the packaged bales under the temporary structure on, is it the west side where the residential drop-off area is? I think that in itself right there could and probably should trigger a minor modification to the site assignment. The site assignment is pretty specific about all operations and all waste being stored inside the building. So I recommend that TBA does submit an application or some type of letter and submittal packet to amend their site modification. So that would include,
Yeah, as far as the storing of the baled material.
yeah,
I'm thinking more of a slight pivot on that process anyways.
okay,
If we were to put the building up on the east side, that would free up some of the space inside the building where we currently store.
okay. You might want to sit up here so we can hear you. Sorry about that. No podium today.
Where we were, where the original east end for the wood storage would free up that bunker space inside the building.
Okay.
So that if we were to go down that road of the baling, we'd be able to store the bales inside the building.
Okay.
So I'd still like the okay from the board to be putting up that building on the west end, but it would more be used more for loader parking in the wintertime. In the summertime, we could keep them undercover, and that would also give us that opportunity to extend coverage for cover for the drop-off recycle area, so that we
Gotcha.
could get
Okay.
those cans completely out of the weather, so people wouldn't have to only come in when it's not raining and
Yeah,
snowing and
exactly.
too windy.
In addition to the wood chip building
Yeah,
on
that
the
was,
east.
yeah.
So if I understand this correctly, the building department's gonna take jurisdiction over the temporary structures.
Correct. I get a determination from them that it would be temporary.
Okay,
So they don't have to pour footings, they don't have to do a foundation.
Mhm.
They do have to get a building permit, but it would be considered a temporary structure. So if that's the case, then it wouldn't be part of their building operation in the 30,000 square foot interior building, because it is a temporary structure.
right, so essentially, we don't have jurisdiction over that then.
Right.
Okay.
So I guess what would happen is when they want to move forward, they would apply for a building permit to put up these temporary structures. And they even do it for like the graduation tents and things like that, because it's a big thing they have to have done correctly. So they would apply for a building permit, and they would go through all the different departments to sign off on the approvals.
Okay.
I don't know what type of requirements would be there for, for the other departments in terms of sprinklers or anything like that with the dry wood chips being stored. Fire department may want to have sprinklers overhead, things like that. So that'll go through all the different departments, people will sign off and give their comments. So I think once we get the building permit application, if we have a consensus from the board or a board vote, if there's any type of modification that's needed, I think that's where we should go with that, so.
All right, so if he does not need an amendment to the site assignment, then more or less he can do what he wants to do.
I believe so, yes.
As
So
long as
did-
you're not storing product outside.
Right. So I guess depending on what you guys decide to do, and as your final proposal,
Yep.
then we can work with you on that.
Okay.
So I guess.
So I think
from
it
the way
just
you wanna
simply
go.
comes down to, your final proposal, just run it by Brian, make sure that it doesn't require some kind of opening up of the site assignment
Yeah.
process. And if it doesn't, then we're not gonna assert jurisdiction over it.
Right.
Yeah,
Sweet.
it would be, yeah, we'll have no storage of waste outside of the existing building.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, several weeks ago, Brian and I toured the facility, and hopefully we can put this to rest real soon. Because looking at the report, and I went over all the information that had been made available to us, a report by your engineer. These structures would not, these temporary structures would not present any danger to the health, safety, or wellness of the residents in North Andover. I concur. No adverse effect upon the environment. No additional throughput. Will allow you to streamline your operation. So, what I know right now, I don't see a problem at all with this,
Good, thank you.
barring the unexpected.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, we'll take that as information.
Okay. Thanks for coming again.
Next item on the agenda, tobacco regulations update. I don't know if this is gonna be Stephen or Brian or.
This is me. This is just an update over after our last meeting when we talked about the various things we would like to do moving forward with the tobacco regulations. I do have a meeting with Ron set up for next Wednesday. I did speak with him, and we went over the items we discussed at the last meeting. He's been looking into the proper language and the legalities of the things we want to do. So he did send me an MAHP policy for the schools that I included in your packets. Just for you guys to look at, it's more of an informational piece that I can pass on to the school department to see if they want to do anything with it. But some of the things we discussed last time was the permit cap, a vaping retail permit cap as well, and the flavors that are allowed, and maybe excluding mint and the wintergreen flavors that are currently exempt from the flavor bans. Adult tobacco retail stores and possession as a potential violation of our tobacco regulations. So, is anything else you guys want me to look at? I do have a meeting with Ron scheduled for next Wednesday. We're going to start going over the language and piecing together the amendments to the regulation. I wanted to bring it to you guys and see if you had thought of anything else since last month.
Just a comment, I think the last 2 days that I've read the Wall Street Journal, there's a full-page ad from Juul, Juul Laboratories, saying that they're very much in favor of a national 21 law for both tobacco and for vaping products. So maybe Martha Coakley is having an influence on them, I don't know.
I think so.
And again, it's pretty much a long-term done deal anyway, so.
But I
Maybe.
know states have done it. Obviously, towns did it first. I think if that sweeps across the country and it's a federal regulation, then all the better.
Well, those of us who have been on this board for a long time knew that the 18 to 21 move started in Needham, and it went to some neighboring communities. We were pretty early on board as well.
Yep.
And, you know, I remember discussing with Ron and Cheryl and others that, you know, a lot of these things come from the ground up. And the ground up gets to the point where it just becomes a mainstream idea and it gets adopted by the state, and maybe the federal government, we'll see.
Yeah.
But I, you know, I'm not happy to see their full-page ads. I know they paid a lot of money for them. But I agree with the subject matter, and I think it looks like they're getting on the bandwagon.
Yep.
The
Okay.
Republican Senator, U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell from Kentucky is in favor of increasing the age, as well as Democrat Senator from Virginia, I believe his name is King. So there seems to be bipartisan support to an extent to increase this age to 21, which is in effect in many states right now anyway.
Mhm. Okay. So I'll meet with Ron next Wednesday. We'll start drafting the amendments
Perfect.
and hopefully have something to you guys at the next meeting for more discussion, corrections, revisions.
Do you want to have one of the board members work on that with you?
Sure.
The only reason I say that is that I had met with Ron a couple of times.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'd be happy to give it up to somebody else who's interested in doing it. But I think it might be helpful to have a board member, if somebody's willing, to either meet or telephone or something on that idea, just to make sure that that the board members are involved at each step in the right.
Excellent. Okay.
So anybody who has time, any of the three or the one who's absent, if they want to get involved in that, I would encourage you to do so. I thought it was a very helpful exercise in that I could tell Ron what would fly on this board and what would not. And so what we did is we crafted the regulation or the recommendation to the board based on what we knew about where each other stood.
Gotcha.
I was thinking, many years ago, you would not have looked at all of us to look at upgrading and tightening these regulations, because I was very much against increasing the age to 21 at that time. However, I've been convinced, I'll be glad to help, but to be realistic, pragmatic, you have as much, if not more, knowledge and experience than any of us. Haven't been involved for many, many years, plus as a doctor too. So I'm there, but shouldn't be alone.
All right.
We should all have some input.
We
you
do have a
looked at-
pulmonologist who actually is an expert on our board here now. More expert than a dumb bowel doc.
Yeah, and obviously I recognize that,
Yeah.
but you have driven this for years as a member of the Board of Health, long before you became chairman.
I'd be more than happy to put my 2 cents into it from
You know,
a professional standpoint.
I think it'd be really helpful, you know, to, as these things are coming through, just saying, yeah, you know, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, you know, I have a background, you know, and I also, I think it would be really helpful. I mean, I've done it once, and I don't want to monopolize it. Other people can do it too, so it's not a big commitment. I think I met with Ron about maybe 30 minutes or so, and he actually came to me with a pre-programmed thing, and we kind of just went through it, and I just said, that'll go, that won't go, this we'll try on, and that's kind of how we did it. I mean, in a sense, when you open up the regulation, the whole regulation is open, but you know, just for the point of, you know, keeping it from getting too messy, basically, you know, identify 4 or 5 places that you want to make a change in, and, you know, all I would ask is that whatever you bring to us is modern, fits with the current state of the art, and, you know, it's something that you think that we can get support for.
Pat's elected.
So thank you. We just did an F troop thing where you stood here, we all took a step back. All right,
Very nice.
very nice.
Elizabeth Bus as a pulmonologist.
Okay, so further correspondence, newsletters. Do we want to deal with Baba's regulation?
Sure.
yet? Maybe we should just go back to Baba's.
Okay.
Take it off the table.
That would be fantastic. So,
Without objection, it's accomplished.
in your packets is a letter from Baba's requesting a variance. Megan had gone in and discovered that they were selling homemade cookies, brownies, and prepackaged baklava, which is normal for some of the smaller sub shops and things like that. But to meet with the food code, any type of retail prepackaged food has to have certain labeling requirements. And that's from the Federal Food Code. I included the excerpt in your packets as well. And this is something that other places and neighboring communities have gotten variance for, because it's something that is pretty straightforward for this type of an operation. So what they do is they get the batter in bulk, and they make their own cookies, they make their own brownies, and they wrap them up and they put them in a tray and they sell them next to the register. So I think in lieu of what they're doing, the foods they're proposing to do this with, it's pretty benign, pretty shelf-stable foods that have very low risk. So one of the things that I did in the packet that I gave you guys tonight was basically just broke down what they're looking for and then conditions that I think would be appropriate for this type of a situation. One would be a written policy and procedures would have to be developed for their process in maintaining the standards of food quality and safety with these particular items. They would be displaying them in the display box in close proximity to the point of sale or the register. And the box that they would display it in would have the label on it itself. So the ingredients, all the different levels of, carbohydrates, calories, things like that are all required, as well as declared allergens. So that would be on the point of sale box that the customer would be taking it from. So if it's there, legible font, normal size letters, visible, I think that's appropriate. I think the variant should be limited to the 3 items that they requested, which is cookies, brownies, and baklava. And I think one other condition that would be appropriate would be each of these products can only be displayed in one batch at a time. So therefore, they would make one batch of cookies, display that one batch with a date label on it. So the label on the box would have the ingredients that are required, allergens, and then the date. So that one batch is for sale, and then when that batch is gone, they can make another batch. But I don't want them having a batch out for sale, then make another batch and putting it on top of the old batch, and then first in, first out is usually the process. But in that case, they may get mixed up if not individually labeled. So one batch at a time for each of the different things that they're selling, and then when that is done, they would rotate and do another batch. And then you said date marking each batch, so you know when it's made. I think is definitely the way to go. But so those are my 6 recommendations on issuing a variance for this type of a situation.
So let me bring up an issue that came up before this board in the past with Van Otis Truffles. I don't know if you were here for that one.
No.
Okay, so Van Otis Truffles, North Andover business at the end of Main Street, right next to the Rolf's pub, and they had their candies in a box, and then they had them pre-wrapped, so with Christmas paper. And one of the things that they came to us with was a request for a variance from the label, and we said you can't do that because these things are going to be given as gifts, and they're not individually labeled. And the reason is that it was going to be purchased by one person and then given to another person. So I think we have to be a little bit careful about creating a precedent that somebody could rely upon to do something with.
Okay.
So it's just a thought. So these are obviously going to be consumed by the person who's purchasing them.
That would be my assumption. When you had a sub shop and there's a little tray of baklava right there, or some cookies to go along with your pizza or sub, that was the impression that I got. And speaking with Megan, it is fairly common, and it is next to the register. So we did have a question: does this have nuts? Yes, on the label right there, it has nuts, or it was made in a nut-friendly factory. But that's up to you guys. I think, in general, the products that they're going to be selling are very shelf-stable and benign, and seem to be more consumer-driven, and to be eaten relatively quickly versus given as a gift.
Any other places around do something similar to that you're aware of?
Nobody that has a variance. Everybody that has anything like this is required to be individually labeled with all of the ingredients and the allergens and the expiration date.
One of the things that we required Van Otis to do was to go to a print shop, get labels, take them off, put them on the back of their thing. Why can't they do that?
They can. They absolutely can. They put in for the request. It's up to the board. He couldn't make it here tonight, but I said I would at least talk to the board about it and see what you guys said.
So the issue is because they're not making it from scratch.
They're selling it retail. So if you go in and you buy a pizza,
Yeah.
that's for your consumption. You're buying the pizza. If you're buying something that's prepackaged for
Puts it in
retail
a
sale,
different
puts it in a different category. I think the
Is this-
intent and the location of the sale, it's intended for consumption with your meal.
Right.
But since it's wrapped and packaged and pre-made and in a display, puts it in a different category, such as retail versus ready to eat.
Well, I'm just thinking of other businesses in town, like Butcher Boy. They sell lots of prepackaged food.
Yep,
They don't have a variance to our regulation.
they have labels.
Right. And they go to a print shop and they print the labels.
I think they have the equipment on site, yeah.
Or they, so, I don't know.
Okay.
That's my opinion, but I'm one of four. I'm happy to hear if anybody else has thoughts.
So I would say that before we would vote, maybe we should have him maybe table it and have the owner come back in front of us, because if we're potentially gonna deny this, at least have him here to explain, or hear our explanation, and he can hear,
Okay.
he can tell us, but that's what I would suggest.
I'm absolutely okay with that.
I mean, it would be completely different if he had like a display case with baklava in it, and somebody says, "I want that piece," and he goes and takes his spatula, takes it out, puts it in a box, and gives it to him. That would not require a label.
No.
So they have an option to not package their cookies.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
Or their baklava.
I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm just concerned about giving this variance and the precedent that it will open up the regulation to a lot of other people asking for the same thing.
Mhm. Okay.
And I'm not trying to be a hard guy about this, I'm just saying that we have a regulation that somebody's asking for relief from. Usually when they ask for relief, it's because they have some kind of hardship in meeting the regulation.
Mhm.
They have some compelling reason that it's not necessary. I'm not really hearing that, and again, I'm not trying to be difficult, but, you know, our job is to basically enforce a set of regulations fairly uniformly.
Right.
And I'm not comfortable with what I know right now, making that variance.
Okay. Yeah, this is something that Megan had found. We talked about it. She said that typically this is something that operations like this would do because the labeling is labor intensive for them. I don't think it's labor intensive in terms of getting labels printed out and doing it. I think it's
They have three products.
Yes.
If they go to a printer and say, you know, print me a strip of self-adhesive things.
Yes.
And have it say this.
Yep.
They'll spend a small amount of money,
Mhm.
and they'll have it, and they just take it off and they just put it on there, and it's done.
right. Yeah.
I don't know, and you can have like one of these things, and you can stamp it so that on the date it's manufactured.
Yeah.
So it meets the letter of the regulation. I don't see a
Yep.
hardship, I guess.
No, I think it was just to cut back on labor. That's what they're
Okay.
not claiming, but this is trying to alleviate them having to do an extra step that they would prefer not to. But I think you guys have the authority to say yes or no. I think having them come in to discuss it at the next meeting, I think is definitely advisable if there's some questions.
So one of the items here is self-service sale, such as cookies. And I'm not familiar with their operation, although I will go there this week. So they have like loose cookies, or these are all boxed?
I think they're in an area next to the cash register. They're pre-wrapped. They're cooked in-house, wrapped to maintain their freshness, and then sold in a display. So that being because they're pre-wrapped and they're made for retail versus immediate consumption, because you can put it in your pocket and take it home. It needs, technically, legally needs a label.
Because it says self-service, so
Correct.
But it's not self-service, right? Or
This
it
would
is?
be, because it's on the counter.
So it's not in like one of those.
It's not
cookie
behind us.
boxes.
It's not
grab
behind.
They say a
You
display,
you
yeah.
put it you put it next to the cash register, and you present them with the
Correct.
money.
So
It's not a bakery case.
And
It's
they're
on
already
top.
pre-wrapped? I was
They-
kind of under the assumption that it was just kind of like an open tray.
No, then it
No,
would
they
be
wrap
I'm a
okay.
little confused on that, too.
Then it would be okay.
If they don't wrap them.
No,
they're a
actually, you
different
can't have them
category.
open like that for self-service
front,
without.
okay.
But you could
Yes.
It has to be-
you could have one of those enclosed
Welcome
trays
to the
that you
world of
open, take a
regulation.
cookie
I
out,
know.
put it in
Correct.
a cookie bag and give it
But
to
I'm
the
just,
customer.
Yes.
that makes it,
Yes.
that makes it even easier just to get a label,
And
and
just,
then
yeah,
it's
stick it
already
on.
pre-wrapped, just
Okay.
put a label on it and.
Correct.
And be
Done.
done with it.
Problem
And
solved.
you don't need a variance, you don't need to come here on a Thursday night at the end of the month.
Yeah,
I'm assuming Megan had some words with them and explained to them what the situation is and how they're supposed to do it, and they probably didn't like that, so she said there's always the option for a variance, which is why
Right.
we got this letter last week.
But I think the threshold of a variance is that the regulation exists not because it exists. If you want to go outside of it, you have to show a hardship. I mean, that's always
Yeah.
been our standard.
Okay.
It's like, so otherwise, I mean, it's like, why have it? Why have the regulation at all? The regulation is there to protect people and keep them from getting sick.
Okay.
I mean, that's, again, I'm not trying to be a hard guy, but it's like, if you're gonna come here and ask us to waive a regulation by granting you a variance, you need to show some kind of a hardship or an inability to comply with the regulation as it's written.
Right.
And we will listen to that and make a ruling. But we haven't gotten anything that, other than that, it might cost me a little money, or it adds to labor, but it's really insignificant, at least from what we know. I mean, we're not hearing any evidence that it's anything other than insignificant. You go to the printer and say, I need it to say this, and you put them on a piece of sticky tape, and you take them off one at a time, and it's like, you
There you
have
go.
to put the labor into wrapping it and sealing it, and then you put the label on the bottom of it, and there you go.
most of the labor's already done, we'll put it in the bag.
Yeah.
Had a different vendor that already has labels.
I guess I would say
Yeah.
I need to hear more, and I think maybe it just might be make the most sense it's not to take any action and see if they want to come back and talk to us about it.
Can continue it to the next meeting.
Or they could listen to the transcript and take our advice about going to the print shop. I know a really good printer.
So continue that until the next meeting?
Continued if they request it.
Okay.
So ask them if they want to come back. And
I
if
will.
they don't, then we don't need to see it again.
I will leave the option in their court. Okay.
Any other items, correspondences, anything anybody wants to discuss? This would be a good time.
On the second page of your write-up that I gave you guys, we have installed our brand-new, shiny sunscreen dispensers. 2 are up and working. The other 3 are installed. I just have to stock them up with sunscreen and the labels and the SPF insert. So we've got Reynolds and McAvoy have been done. I did these. Me and Caroline did these today. So they're going
We
to
would only
be.
make these with bug spray, then we.
I know, right?
So I saw something, I think in one of my newsletters, talking about sunscreen. Did you see it?
No,
I get this thing from the AMA every morning. It's like AMA morning rounds, and it kind of summarizes something to do with health. And I just happened to be in Florida a week and a half ago, and every day using sunscreen, and they talked about the 3 common sunscreen, things, ingredients. And they talked about how they are absorbable, and you can actually measure them in the blood, because the issue is if you're going to use sunscreen properly, and you're going to be out in the sun for a long period of time, it's reapply, reapply, reapply. Well, it turns out that there's actually biological accumulation of it, and I think the editorial comment is that this needs further study.
Oh.
So, I mean, the way that sunscreens work is you put it on the surface, you expect it to stay on the surface, and what it does is it prevents the ultraviolet light from reaching the deeper layers of the skin. Basically, it's got some chemical property. But I think a lot of these things are aromatic hydrocarbons, and they can actually dissolve through, they can dissolve in both liquid and water, and fats and water, so they can actually penetrate the dermal layers and get absorbed into the bloodstream, and who knows what happens to them after that. But it's just an interesting thing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe we're all going to wear long sleeve shirts in the summer, and hats and
Okay.
glasses and everything else.
Brian, how are these sunscreen dispensers being paid?
Through a public health programming fund that we have.
That revolving fund that you voted for the other night at town meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
How do you, what's the process for refilling them? Do you have like them, how are you gonna know when they need to be refilled or just putting them on a rotation?
We're gonna put them on a standard rotation. So we've got assistance with the youth center and Stevens Pond staff, as well as us.
Do they work like the Purell dispensers? You put your hand in and it gives you a measured amount?
Yep.
Nice.
Exactly. When I did it at Reynolds, there were some kids looking at it when I pulled up, because it was already installed. I wanted to actually fill it, and there were some kids looking at it, trying to figure out what it was. I actually had them help me install everything. They thought it was the best thing ever. Then they all use sunscreen. One of the moms was like, "It's not sunny out. You don't need it."
So
they were all excited.
These are at Stevens Pond, Drummond Park, Drummond Playground, Reynolds Playground used to be called Reynolds Field, McAvoy, which is on Sutton Street, and Carl Thomas, which is on Mass Ave.
Yes.
Bravo. Any other matters of import that people wish to discuss?
I think so.
Okay,
In that case, I make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.
Say no